Alright, well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's been a while. How have you been? Where should we start? Let's begin with a Creed quote. So, I made a video a few years ago ranking different metal vocalists in a tier list, and I thought it was a pretty good video at the time, but looking back on it now, it's not super great, and it's not that it's not representative of what I do now currently, but my main issue going back on it was there are a lot of vocalists that I didn't know back then that I know now. So we're gonna be ranking a lot of these singers on Tier Maker. I was gonna crop out, like do this opera with an ad blocker, but I was like, you know what, we'll do it on Chrome. It's still dark mode. I just hid my bookmarks and all that stuff. So we're gonna do that, and also there are still some of these vocalists that I don't recognize, so I'm going to be using stuff like Inspect Element on, we'll just use this on, Fred Durst for an example. And we'll see, that's what I'm going to be looking at. So, video's not going to be super duper, visually pleasing, but I make videos with more of a podcast style anyways. The visuals aren't super duper necessary, in my personal opinion. So, starting off, we got from God tier to Don't Know, and everything in between. I didn't change this at all. I think this is actually a pretty fair way to do this. So we're just going to start. We're going to go in order here. I'm not going to pick and choose here. And of course, there's a lot of artists that I would have put on this list that are not here. But we're just going to do this with these guys, because if I start adding more people, then this video is going to be 8 hours long, and I don't think anybody wants to sit through something like that. So, first one I can see is Alex Terrible of Slaughter to Prevail. Now, this might be a bit of a controversial thing to say because of how some people might feel about Slaughter to Prevail, but they're one of my favorite deathcore bands, if not probably my favorite deathcore band of all time. And I really love Alex's vocal approach. I still feel like he has a really unique voice in deathcore. You know, he's pretty instantly recognizable whenever he does a guest feature on a song. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put him in S tier, just because Slaughter to Prevail are still very new, even though they've been around since 2015. I'm saving God tier for pretty much the vocalists who are not only amazing, but they have an incredible legacy that they'll be remembered way longer after they've passed. So that's kind of the metric that I'm using for that. I think Alex Terrible could get up there with a little bit more time, but as of right now, I feel pretty comfortable with putting Alex in S tier. Coming up next, we've got Andy Biersack of Black Veil Brides. I think his voice is okay. His voice reminds me a lot of Chad Kroeger from Nickelback, which is funny because Black Veil Brides and Nickelback sound pretty much nothing alike. But I think he's a fine vocalist. I'm not a crazy huge Black Veil Brides fan, so you know, I know a handful of their songs, but that's really about it. But I think Andy is a decent enough singer for the type of music that Black Veil Brides does. I feel pretty comfortable with putting him in C. Like I said, not a bad singer at all, just his band is not usually what I listen to. And that will kind of go into some of the ranking of whether or not how much I actually even like the artist anyways. So, this guy I do not recognize. Let's inspect him and see who it is. Oh, it's Ben Dwyer. I don't know how to say his last name. Ben from Shadow of Intent. He's awesome. He's really cool. I like his vocals a lot. I always like it whenever he does vocal features on songs. He is definitely another very unique voice in deathcore. I don't think he's quite on the same level as Alex Terrible, but I think he could get there with a little bit more time, and if Shadow of Intent had just a little bit more of a push with their own music. So I think we're gonna put Ben in A tier. I think that's pretty good. You know, and just for saying S is incredible, A is really, really good, B is still good, C is solid but not my favorite, D and F are just their voice just is not for me at all. I just don't care for it. Now this, I believe, is Brittany Slays of Unleash the Archers. It is. She's awesome. I really like her. Unleash the Archers is a really cool band. I feel like they're pretty underrated in terms of modern power metal, but I also don't really listen to a lot of power metal, so who knows? They could be pretty universally loved. I have no idea. But I think for Brittany, we're going to put her in B tier as well, because I don't listen to Unleash the Archers all the time, so I'm not as familiar with her voice, but she is really good. She is great. Now we've got our first God tier vocalist, Bruce Dickinson. Of course, everybody knows him from Iron Maiden. He also has a solo project too. That's pretty good. Incredible voice. His voice hasn't aged the greatest, but then again, he's had throat cancer before and he survived it, so I feel like that should be something to commend either way. And plus, his voice still sounds pretty good on like the newer Iron Maiden live recordings and on the Senjutsu album, which I thought was actually pretty decent. So, you know, I think Bruce Dickinson is pretty fair. Going God tier. His scream on The Number of the Beast is one of the most iconic in all of metal, so, you know, I feel like he deserves the God tier spot just for that song and that album, really. Or pretty much any of the 80s Iron Maiden albums that he sang on, which was most of them. So, another thing, I've been going kind of quick through all these. That's just because the last video was pretty long, and so I'm not going to, this is not like a complete vocal analysis of all these vocalists. It's just a matter of, do I like their voice or not, or do I like the bands that they're in or not? Because if you want an in-depth analysis, go watch, the Charismatic Voice or something like that. They would do a way better job explaining that than I would. I just like the music, and I play a little bit of guitar. That's it. Now, this is Brian Garris, the vocalist of Knocked Loose, if I remember correctly. Yes, that is him. It's a bit of an older picture, so I didn't recognize him. This is going to be a hot take, but I actually really like his vocals in Knocked Loose. I was kind of put off by them at first because, I imagine everybody listening to Knocked Loose, especially if they're not into hardcore music at all. So his vocal style is definitely very unique and very, can be very abrasive at the start. But once I started listening to more and more Knocked Loose, especially once their new album released, called You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To, I really love that album, by the way. It's amazing. His vocals just match perfectly with the music, I think. And so we're going to put Brian in A tier. Again, I don't think it's as good as Alex Terrible, but their voices also really aren't comparable. I'm not trying to compare these guys to each other. It's just how I feel about it. Alright. We've got another vocalist I'm going to put in God tier. This is Chester Bennington of Linkin Park. Easily, probably... would I say he's the most recognizable voice in all of nu metal? Probably. At least of rock bands from the past 20 years, Chester has one of the most instantly recognizable vocalists. As soon as you hear him, you know, okay, it's Linkin Park. And I think that goes a long, long way. He was definitely one of the best screamers in nu metal or 2000s hard rock at the time. His scream is ferocious. And his singing is really good too. So he was an all-around outstanding vocalist, and it still really hurts that he's no longer with us. It's sad. But all can we do except for keeping the band's legacy alive? That's really it. Now, Chris Barnes, formerly of Cannibal Corpse, now of 6 Feet Under. I'll be honest, my biggest hot takes around Cannibal Corpse is that I'm not a huge fan of the Barnes era. I've made that no secret before. Those first few albums, besides The Bleeding, I think The Bleeding's a pretty solid album. Other than that, most of it just doesn't do much for me. I do like Hammer Smash Face though. That song is really awesome, and it's actually really fun to play on guitar as well. But Chris Barnes' vocals, especially nowadays, just don't do anything for me, and there's way more death metal bands that I would rather listen to. I'm going to put Chris in D because I still feel like his voice on the older 6 Feet Under albums are actually still pretty good, especially his, and this is a Cannibal Corpse album, but I felt like his vocal performance was probably the strongest on The Bleeding, which is why it's my favorite Barnes era Cannibal Corpse album. So we're gonna go with there. Now, we've got Chris Motionless of Motionless in White. He is, I feel, a little bit of a connection to Motionless in White because they're from Pennsylvania, and I'm also from Pennsylvania, so that's kind of cool. But at the same time, he's a pretty average metalcore vocalist. He's about what I would imagine a good metalcore vocalist would sound, so I think I'm going to put him in B for that. I think that's fair. I could put him up to A if I was maybe a little bit more of a fan of the earlier albums, but yeah, I think B is very fair, because if I start doing that, then everybody's going to be A or S or God tier, and I just don't think that's really all that correct. Now this is, I believe, Christina Scabbia of Lacuna Coil. Now, like I said, there are a lot of vocalists that I didn't know of in the video. I would say I know who Lacuna Coil is, I know who Christina Scabbia is, but I am not familiar enough with Lacuna Coil's material to really judge her voice. I just don't think that's correct. So it would be wrong of me to make an assumption based on a couple of songs that I've heard before. So yeah, we're gonna do Don't Know. Now, coming up next is somebody that actually a handful of people that I'm very familiar with, which is, first up is Chuck Schuldiner of Death. Death, as I imagine with a lot of people, was my first introduction into death metal, and they've kind of stuck with me throughout all of my listening years as somebody who is into some death metal. He definitely has a very recognizable voice. You know it's a death song whenever you hear it. His guitar playing is absolutely excellent too, but that's not what we're talking about. I think B is a very good spot for Chuck Schuldiner because, yeah, he has a very I would say like a mid-range in death metal. Not that like his voice is mid or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying, but like he doesn't have like any super duper exceptional vocal performances. He's just a solid death metal vocalist. That's what he does, or that's what he did, and that's that. So rest in peace, Chuck. We miss you. Wish Death was still around, or Control Denied was still around. Coming up next is Corey Taylor of Slipknot, Stone Sour, his solo project. I think he's done a lot of other stuff. Do I want to put him in S or do I want to put him in God tier? I'm not really sure. I feel like these are pretty interchangeable. I think we're gonna put Alex. I think if we're gonna put Alex Terrible in S tier, I think Corey Taylor also deserves to be in S tier. God tier could be up there just yet, but not necessarily that I think that our vocalists are better than him. But it's just like, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. We'll put Corey Taylor up in S tier. He has a very instantly recognizable voice. His screaming is absolutely insane, especially on the first two Slipknot albums. His work with Stone Sour is also really good too, if you're into like 2000s rock like I am. And he's one of the most iconic frontmen in modern metal. So yeah, I think God tier is the way to go. Also, this is definitely his worst mask design. I think the We Are Not Your Kind era. It's just not great. The one that he has now looks sick though. Not the one that's based off of his old look, but the one that he had before that, from like 2022. That one was really good. That's just a little unrelated thing. Corpse Grinder. I think we will also put. I think I will put Corpse Grinder, aka George Fisher, who is currently the vocalist of Cannibal Corpse, in S tier. Excuse me. I think that I think we would have to wait and see, because there's still a point in contention between. It's like the Metallica versus Megadeth debate, but for Cannibal Corpse, it's Chris Barnes versus Corpse Grinder. Who do you like more? I personally like Corpse Grinder more, as this tier list accurately reflects that. I think his voice is absolutely iconic. I always get excited whenever I find out that he's on a song with another band I like. Let's say like Ice Nine Kills or Revocation. He's really great. He seems like a cool dude. Obviously, he's holding a bunch of stuffed animals in this picture, which is amazing. I love it. And his solo album's actually pretty solid from what I remember. But I haven't listened to it since it released, but I do remember that he had a solo album release, and it wasn't too bad. So, yeah, I think Corpse Grinder is perfectly fair to put in S tier. Now, this might be a little bit controversial, but I'm also going to put Courtney LaPlante of Spirit Box in S tier. She's really, really exceptional screamer. I love her harsh vocals, the way she sounds. And I also love her clean vocals, especially on songs like, say, Circle With Me, or Too Close, Too Late from the Fear Fear EP. Trust Fall is another really great song that I love from Spirit Box with her vocals. Constance is another great one. Yeah, I'm also very biased because I love Spirit Box. They're one of my favorite like modern metal bands, along with bands like Sleep Token, Orbit Culture, Bleed From Within, stuff like that. Sanguisugabog, of course, I like them. Very, very, very diverse range of bands that I just listed there. But I think Courtney is a very, very awesome vocalist, and I think she will be very much remembered and hailed as one of the more iconic voices in modern metalcore, or really just modern heavy music in general, not even just like metalcore. But yeah, she's great. Now we've got another one. We've got Danny Filth of Cradle of Filth. I think just for his vocal range alone just puts him in A tier. Those highs that he hits, it's like, oh, it's so good. And his lows are actually pretty good too from the few Cradle of Filth songs that I remember. I'm going to put him, I think A is fair. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna swap Chuck and Danny just because I'm more familiar with Death's discography actually. Now I think about than Cradle of Filth's. So yeah, not that Danny is a bad vocalist, but just I'm not a huge black metal fan, so that's that. I'm not always in the mood to listen to Cradle of Filth, but I always appreciate his voice. His voice is very good, and I still want to hear that Ed Sheeran collaboration. I'm still very curious about that. If Bring Me the Horizon could do it, Cradle of Filth absolutely could do it. Now we've got Darren Malakian of System of a Down. Now, I think of the two vocalists of System of a Down, I like Serge way more, but we'll get to him. But Darren's voice isn't too bad. I like it. I think it's fine. It's a good contrast between Serge's voice, but the main issue that I have is in the later System of a Down albums like Mesmerize and Hypnotize, Darren does most of the singing, which doesn't get annoying per se, but it's like I'd much rather hear Serge sing those lines more than Darren. But that's just me. I still love System of a Down. Toxicity is one of my favorite albums ever made. But that's mostly because Serge is the main singer on it and Darren's the backup singer, which I feel like is how it should be. But I'm just some asshole on the internet, so what do I know? Now, this might be a bit of a hot take, because this is Dave Mustaine from Megadeth, of course. And I actually like his voice. It fits Megadeth's music very, very well, I feel like. And, very much like a grizzled thrash vocalist who's actually a pretty solid singer. I think the reason why people say that Dave Mustaine's a bad singer is because of his tone, like the tone of his voice. But you can't really control that much. Like, if you listen to some of the albums, like, say, Euthanasia, or Cryptic Writings, or even, like, Rust in Peace or Countdown to Extinction, you can tell that Dave Mustaine knows how to sing. He's good at it. It's just that the tone of his voice is very rough and kind of abrasive. But like I said, I think it fits Megadeth's music very well. So I think for that, we're going to put Dave Mustaine in B tier. Coming up next, I already did some Inspect Element, but this is Diggy Allen, the vocalist of Infinite Annihilator. Now, I don't really listen to Infinite Annihilator at all, so I'm not super duper familiar with his voice, so I'm going to put it in I don't know. I've heard him do guest features on some songs before, like I think the band Project Vengeance, which also has like people like Will Ramos and like Taylor Barber from Left to Suffer and stuff like that. So I've heard his voice before, but I don't listen to his stuff that features him enough to accurately rate him. And the same goes for, I believe this is Eddie Hermida, the current vocalist of Suicide Silence. Suicide Silence is a band that I never really got into, especially like even when getting into deathcore. I just never really listened to much Suicide Silence at all. I gravitated more towards bands like Whitechapel, Thy Art Is Murder, and then nowadays more bands like Fit for an Autopsy, Brand of Sacrifice, Slaughter to Prevail, stuff like that. So we're going to be doing that. So this is two people in one. These next few. These are the two vocalists of I Prevail, Eric and Brian. Eric is the screamer and Brian is the clean singer, and I think they're both very, very good at what they do. So I think we're going to put them at B tier. I especially like Eric's feature on one of Nothing More's new songs called House on Sand. I absolutely love that song, and Eric's vocals are great on it. And I like Brian's vocals too. He's just a very solid singer. Just nothing super duper crazy, exceptional or special, but he gets the job done, and his voice sounds nice. So I'm going to put him in B tier. Now, I don't recognize this individual. Who is this? Flora Jansen from Nightwish, I believe. I believe she's in Nightwish. And I think she has other solo music and stuff like that, I'm sure. I don't listen to Nightwish at all, really. I know a couple of their songs, but if you played me Nightwish, I probably wouldn't know the songs. So I don't feel really that comfortable rating her voice. But now, this next person, I do feel very comfortable with rating their voice. This is Fred Durst of Limp Bizkit. He is not the worst. I will say he's not the worst singer of all time. I think C is a very appropriate thing for him. I think he's, based on my limited knowledge of rap and hip-hop, I think he's actually a pretty decent rapper, technically speaking. You know, he's very coherent. His lyrics aren't the best, but Limp Bizkit at this point, I've kind of leaned into like the fact that they're a super duper goofy and silly band and not really all that serious and kind of like immature a little bit. So it's definitely one of their strengths now, but imagine in the 2000s when they imagine we're probably trying to be taken a little bit more seriously. It wasn't the greatest for them, but I think Fred Durst is a decent singer. He's not bad. He's a pretty solid rapper too, I think. But like I said, I don't listen to much rap or hip-hop, so I'm no expert in it, so take my opinion of Fred Durst as a rapper with a Mount Everest-sized grain of salt. But, yeah, that's just that. Who is this guy? I do not know him, actually, based on Hansi Kirsch. Oh, I think he's the vocalist of Blind Guardian, I think. So I don't listen to Blind Guardian. Like I said, I really don't listen to much power metal. The only two bands that I really have like on somewhat regular rotation are Sabaton and Unleash the Archers. And even that, I don't listen to Unleash the Archers a ton. I mainly just listen to Sabaton because I like history. All right, so we're gonna put Hansi in. I don't know because I don't feel comfortable enough ranking his voice compared to other singers that I'm very familiar with. Now, next is Howard Jones. He's in Light the Torch now, but he used to be in Killswitch Engage. I don't know why I did the Inspect Element. I didn't need to. I think S tier is the only acceptable spot for Howard Jones to be in. The End of Heartache and As Daylight Dies are absolutely legendary albums. Probably the two best Killswitch Engage albums ever. Even though I think Alive or Just Breathing deserves to be in that conversation as well as Disarm the Descent, which I think was the album that Jesse Leach came back to sing on. Because obviously Howard Jones was not the original vocalist of Killswitch Engage. Jesse Leach was. So, but I think Howard is a very, very excellent singer. His screams are awesome. His clean singing is amazing. He's instantly recognizable. I think that's what really makes the hallmark of an amazing vocalist is, can you tell it's them right off the bat? Some people might feel differently about that, but that's just how I feel about it. So, yeah, Howard Jones, S tier. I think that's fair. James LaBrie of Dream Theater. He is fine. He is fine. We're going to put him in B tier. His voice isn't as good as it used to be back in the 90s, but, I mean, as singers age, obviously their voice is going to sound different, or, you know, some notes they might be able to reach back then are not going to be able to reach now. So I don't really put that against them. Dream Theater also just kind of suffers from, I think James LaBrie kind of also suffers from being in a band where the vocals are not the key focus for a lot of fans. People are usually paying attention to the guitar playing or the drums from John Petrucci and Mike Portnoy / Mike Mangini. So I feel like his vocals kind of get lost in the shuffle a little bit, at least as the center of attention from fans, which it's progressive metal. Like, nobody's going to really pay attention. Not a lot of people are going to really pay attention to the vocalist unless it's Tool or like Periphery or something. Now, coming up next is James Hetfield of Metallica. I think that James Hetfield is a god tier vocalist. Not because he's he's not a super technically proficiently amazing singer. If any of the words that came out of my mouth just made any sort of sense. But Metallica is one of those bands that everybody knows. Everybody knows what they sound like. Everybody knows how James Hetfield sounds as a singer. Everybody's able to recognize him. And I think for that, just being in God tier just makes sense because he's going to be remembered not only as one of the best rhythm guitarists in metal, but also one of the most iconic vocalists. Like I said, even if he isn't as good as say is technically good as someone like Bruce Dickinson or Rob Halford. So, coming up next, we've got Joe Duplantier from Gojira. I absolutely love Gojira. They're amazing. They're great live. I think Joe is an incredible A tier. The thing I like about Joe's vocals is that he's able to add pitch to his screams. Like, whenever he screams, there is an actual note that's being sung there. It's not like because a lot of screamers don't actually sing like real like musical notes. It's kind of just like a static like scream. But Joe in Gojira actually like he pitches his screams up and down to fit with the melody of the song, and I think that's really cool. And that's not something a lot of singers do. So I think for that, A tier is perfectly acceptable for Joe from Gojira. I think the only thing that's holding it back is I think his cleans are just a little bit lacking. But even then, that's like me really digging for something to nitpick. So yeah, we're gonna go with A tier for Joe. Johannes Eckerstrom from Avatar. He is awesome as well. I'm gonna put him in A tier as well. I saw Avatar live last year, opening for In This Moment, Ice Nine Kills. They absolutely blew me away. I've been listening to a lot more Avatar since then, and I really like Johannes' vocals. I think he has a very unique voice in metal, and they're from Sweden, I'm pretty sure. So, duh, like a metal band from Sweden. Oh yeah, they're gonna be good. That's usually how it goes. So, yes, Johannes from Avatar is an easy S, not S tier, A tier. Coming up next, we have Jonathan Davis from Korn, and I just realized this video is starting to get long. I better start getting faster with this. Jonathan Davis. I think A tier is also very fair for Jonathan Davis. Has a very iconic voice. He's actually really underrated with his harsh vocals. Some of the growls that he does on some of those earlier Korn records are really impressive. So, yeah. And of course, his scat vocals are iconic. So, we'll do that. Now, this is, I believe, Kyle Anderson. He's the vocalist of Brand of Sacrifice, yes. I recently saw Brand of Sacrifice live on the Summer Slaughter Tour with Veil Amaya, Left to Suffer, Gideon, Tala, 1056, and a bunch of other bands. And he's amazing. I absolutely love Kyle Anderson's vocals. He is super duper sick. I think he should be considered in the running to be some of the best deathcore vocalists of all time. And he's a really cool guy. I got to meet him and talk to him after the show, and he was really nice. So that will also play into it. So, yes, I feel like Kyle Anderson is super duper underrated, as well as Brand of Sacrifice's music, even though they're starting to get more popular now, but I still feel like they don't get a whole lot of recognition. And I think that should change, because they're awesome. This one, I don't remember. I don't remember who he is. He is Mark Hudson. Oh, Dragon Force. Okay. We'll do C for Mark Hudson. He's a decent singer. I like him. I'm just not a crazy huge Dragon Force fan, is all. You know, he just hits some very high notes. I don't know if he's the one that sang on Through the Fire and Flames, because I know Dragon Force has had a couple different singers, so I'm not 100% on that. Now, this is Maria Brink of In This Moment. I used to not like her voice at all, but honestly, seeing In This Moment live last year, co-headline with Ice Nine Kills, and listening to their newest album, God Mode, has really turned me around on her voice. I actually quite like it now. She has a very unique way of singing. She doesn't sound a whole lot like very many other singers, and I think that's one of her strengths. And she's also just very easily able to convey pure just hate and rage in her music, especially on songs like Whore or Big Bad Wolf. So yeah, Maria Brink, B tier. I like her voice now. Now I'm gonna be biased here. I'm gonna be extremely biased because Trivium is my favorite band of all time. So naturally, I'm gonna put Matt Heafy in S tier. I think his vocals have really. I love hearing his vocal evolution from Ember to Inferno to In the Court of the Dragon. I think his vocals have improved so much more. His screams have got much better. And recently, he's been figuring out how to do his old style of screamings, like on the old Trivium albums, or really his album screams, with the proper technique so he doesn't blow out his voice, and he sounds incredible. So, I'm really hoping that Trivium and Bullet for My Valentine come near me on the Poison Descendancy tour next year. That would be amazing. Even though I've seen Trivium twice already, I want to see them again because, like I said, they're my all-time favorite band. So, yeah. Moving on is, speak of the devil with Bullet for My Valentine, Matt Tuck. I think we're going to put Matt Tuck in A tier, actually, rather, not S. His voice on the first 3 Bullet albums are really iconic. His screams are great. His singing's great. And he still sounds really good. If you listen to the latest Bullet for My Valentine album from 2021, I think his screams sound even better, honestly, and his vocals sound pretty good. He still has a very recognizable voice, especially for metalcore. And that's that. Maynard James Keenan of Tool, A Perfect Circle, and Pussifer. I think I'm going to put Maynard in S tier, actually. Not God tier just quite yet, because I think because Tool, A Perfect Circle, and Pussifer are all still very active bands. Well, Tool is the most active out of all of them, I think. But, Maynard still has a very strong vocal performance on all the Tool albums, and, he still sings well every night live, so I can't be too mad at that. Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth. I probably said his last name wrong, but that's okay. I think I'm going to put his vocals in B tier. I think his clean vocals sound pretty good. His growls are pretty good. At least back in the day. They're not as great now. Like if you watch some of the live videos of them doing like songs like Ghost of Perdition live, it doesn't sound as good as he used to, which I think is partly why Opeth stopped doing what deviated from their progressive death metal kind of direction and went more into just like prog rock because that suits his voice better. And I think that's fine. The newer albums aren't super my thing, but Ghost Reveries, Blackwater Park, and Watershed are all fantastic. But I'm also just not as big of an Opeth fan as I used to be, so we're gonna put Michael in B tier. Now we've got Mitch Lucker, the former vocalist of Suicide Silence. May he rest in peace. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with Suicide Silence. I didn't really get into him. So, out of pure respect for him, I'm just going to not put him in the tier list. Just for that. M Shadows from Avenged Sevenfold. Another one of my all-time favorite bands with one of my favorite vocalists of all time. But I think M Shadows, technically speaking, we're going to put in A tier, especially since his voice has changed a lot from Waking the Fallen to Life is But a Dream. Yeah, and even from the stage to Life is But a Dream, his voice is a lot different. So I think we're going to go with that. I think he's still a good singer, but his screams aren't as good as they used to be, I don't think. And yeah, we're going to go with that. Now, I feel kind of bad for completely missing him in the last video. This is Noah Sebastian of Bad Omens. I'm pretty sure. Now, I wouldn't say I'm a massive Bad Omens fan. I like them a lot. I think The Death of Peace of Mind is an absolutely fantastic album from start to finish, but I'm not as familiar with the wider discography of Bad Omens, i.e. their 2 other albums. But I think Noah is still a really great singer, and on a side note, I kind of it makes me sad that the fandom treats him like they do. Like especially, I saw a bunch of people getting mad because Bad Omens canceled their Europe tour because he was burnt out. Which like he was on tour for like past couple of years. Like, come on. I'd rather have a show get canceled than something much worse than that, which I don't even need to describe on here. Ollie Sykes of Bring Me the Horizon. I think his voice is fine. It's pretty solid. My enjoyment of his voice really depends on what kind of song Bring Me the Horizon is doing. I like his voice on the really heavier songs. Some of his voice on some of the more rock-focused songs, like Strangers, I think are just okay. But again, it's kind of like it's like your enjoyment of Ollie Sykes' voice, I think, depends on how much you like Bring Me the Horizon's music, which your mileage can very much vary on that, depending on what style they decide to go in on any given song. So I think B for Ollie Sykes is pretty fair. Ozzy. I don't think I even really need to say anything about Ozzy. He's like James Hetfield. He's not the most technically proficient, but he's one of the most instantly recognizable, and he's going to be one of the most remembered vocalists of all time. And I think that's worth something, right? Phil Anselmo of Pantera. I think we're also going to put Phil Anselmo in A tier, because I love his voice from the 90s era albums. And I actually saw the newest incarnation of Pantera last year with Zakk Wylde and Charlie Benante replacing the Abbott brothers, and I thought he sounded really good, actually. He sounded a lot better than he had did in years past. I remember watching a video of him performing This Love with Anthrax, and it just was not great at all. It made me kind of sad. But hearing his voice now is actually like really good. So, really, not quite to how he sounded in the 90s and early 2000s, but still pretty damn solid. Now, we've got probably the GOAT of deathcore vocalists, Phil Bozeman of Whitechapel, which is funny I say that because Will Ramos is underneath him, but I'll get into Will in a second here. I think Phil he's definitely not one of the most underrated vocalists in deathcore, because a big draw to Whitechapel's music is his vocals. But listen to an album, and his clean singing is actually really great too, along with his screams and growls, which are so nasty sounding in a good way. Listen to an album like The Valley or Kin, and you'll see what I'm talking about with both of his vocal styles. So like especially with his clean singing, listen to the song Orphan off of Kin, and then off the same album, listen to A Blood-Soaked Symphony, and you'll see what I mean. Rob Halford of Judas Priest. Again, don't need to say much about him. He's one of the best to ever do it. He still sounds amazing, even in his 70s, so that's definitely got to be worth something. And he's proof that, if you take good care of yourself, you can still be amazing at what you do in your older ages, which I think is great. Same with Ronnie James Dio. He was an opera singer that turned to metal, and he has one of the most iconic voices of all time. And kind of hot take, I like his vocals more in Black Sabbath than his solo music, but that's just me. Now, this is somebody I had ranked lower in the original video, I'm pretty sure, but this is Ronnie Radke of Falling in Reverse. Now, of course, we all know that Ronnie is a very polarizing and controversial person in rock and metal, but he's a really good singer, especially nowadays. Obviously, a lot of people still make fun of him for how he used to sound in Escape the Fate, and then the first Falling in Reverse sound the still with verbal weights. But listen to his growls on the song Ronald. Just listen to that. Listen to his singing on the new song All My Life. And really, a lot of the newer Falling in Reverse stuff is actually, his vocals are actually quite good, regardless of how you feel about the guy or his music. He is a good singer. He's a very good singer. He knows what he's doing, and he knows that. He knows he's good too, which I think is why he has he's a little bit more arrogant than some other people in the rock metal. I shouldn't even really say arrogant. He just doesn't care about speaking his mind, which lands him into trouble sometimes, which can't really defend him on that. But this is not about Ronnie as a person. This is about Ronnie as a singer, and I think he's good. So I think A tier is very deserving, especially with his rapping on Watch the World Burn. He does that kind of real fast-paced Eminem rap god kind of style, and he's also doing insane death growls on a song like Ronald. So yeah, who is this? I can't really see his face that well, so I'm not really sure. Sean Harmonous. We're gonna look that up real quick because I'm now actually very curious on who he is. Sean. He is the vocalist of Make Them Suffer, it looks like. Yes, Make Them Suffer. Okay. I like Make Them Suffer. They're a pretty solid band. But I don't know enough of their music to really judge. So we're going to put don't know. Surge of System of a Down. I love his voice. Toxicity is one of my favorite metal albums ever. And I don't feel like he has a very unique vocal style. His inhale screaming is great. His singing is very recognizable. So, Surge definitely deserves S tier. Along with Spencer Charnas of Ice Nine Kills. I think he's really, really good. His screams are really nice. I feel like his screams go a little bit underappreciated, but his singing is exceptional. Especially, like, listen to the chorus of The Shower Scene, if you haven't already heard it a million times already, because that song is super popular. But yeah. Because I'm also biased because I really like Ice Nine Kills. I've seen them live. Like I said, I've saw them live, and they were awesome. So, that's that. I know this is Baby Metal, but I don't know which vocalist of Baby Sue Metal. I like her voice. I like Baby Metal's vocals. They're pretty cute. I like them. I shouldn't say cute. It's like I didn't mean that as like a derogatory way. I like her voice. That's what I'll say before I take myself into a deeper hole. This is Tatiana of Ginger. I don't know if I said her name right, but I think she is also a really fantastic singer. So we're gonna put her in A. Listen to the audio tree session that Ginger did, and you'll see what I mean. Or like just listen to any of Ginger's songs, and you'll get what I'm talking about. Tom Araya of Slayer. He's, again, his vocal style fits Slayer's music extremely well, but technically speaking, he kind of just yells into the mic. Nothing super crazy. So I think we're going to put Tom Araya at C. I believe this is Tom Barber of Chelsea Grin, and I think he's also sang with like Lorna Shore and stuff. So he's good. I like him. I think we're going to put Tom Barber in B. Very, very solid singer, in deathcore especially. I believe this is Vincent Bennett of Acacia Strain. It is. I'm going to put an I don't know because I haven't heard enough Acacia Strain to really accurately judge his vocals. So I'm going to put him in I don't know. And like I said, for these I don't know, it's like I know who these people are, but I just haven't listened to enough of their music to accurately judge them, especially with like people like Matt Hafey, who are like in some of my favorite bands of all time. So that's that. Will Ramos. I think Will Ramos is an exceptional vocalist. I really love his vocal style. I think he's great. I just think the Lorna Shore is just a tad overrated. Like they're still a good band. I still like them. Pain Remains was one of my favorite albums of 2022. But everybody talks about Lorna Shore as they're like the super duper crazy good exception of like deathcore. Like this is the pinnacle of deathcore. I just don't think that's true. I still think that crown should go to either Slaughter to Prevail or Brand of Sacrifice in terms of music. But vocal wise, Will Ramos is absolutely on par with Alex Terrible and Kyle Anderson and Ben Dwyer. So that's that. Zach De La Rocha of Rage Against the Machine. Very solid rapper. Not a super great singer though. I'm going to put it in C just because I'm not like a super great fan of Rage Against the Machine's music. Not because of their politics or anything like that. I don't really care about that kind of stuff, which is probably going to be a bit of a controversial statement. But their style of rock just isn't my thing. If you hear my phone go off, whoop-de-doo. So, coming up next, we have, I believe this is Danny Worsnop, the singer of Asking Alexandria. Okay, sorry about the pause. I had to do something real quick. So, Danny Worsnop of Asking Alexandria. I'm not a crazy huge Asking Alexandria fan. I like some of their songs, but that actually doesn't say. But we're gonna assume that's him, because that looks like him. I think he's fine. We're gonna put him in C, rather, not D. I believe this is Franz from Attila, and it doesn't say. So, I believe this is Franz. I'm going to rank him as Franz. I'm going to say, I don't know, because I don't really listen to Attila at all, so that's that. This guy, I don't recognize him. Oh, Britton Bond. Oh, this is Wage War. This is Britton from Wage War, I think. It kind of looks like him. Yeah, Britton Bond. Yeah, Wage War. I like Wage War a lot. I've been getting into them more recently, and I think Britton's a pretty good vocalist. I think we're going to put him in A tier. This is Austin Carlisle, I believe, of Mice and Men, and I'm just not as familiar with his vocals, so we're going to say I don't know, because all the newer of Mice and Men stuff I know is with the other singer. I believe his name is Aaron Pauley. So we're going to do that. This is going to be a controversial one. Ivan Moody of Five Finger Death Punch. Five Finger was one of my gateways into metal, so I've always been able to love them and appreciate their music for that, even if I get why they get a lot of flack in wider circles in the metal community, but I don't really care about all that stuff. So Ivan, I think, is a really good singer. His screams are really great, especially on the first Five Finger Death Punch album, The Way of the Fist. And his clean vocals have just gotten better and better too, so yeah, let's do that. Jacoby Shaddix of Papa Roach, he's fine. He does a good enough job, Papa Roach, and that's that. Tim Lambesis of As I Lay Dying, might be a bit of a controversial statement to give him any second of time based on his past, but I think as a vocalist, I think he's pretty good. You know, he's very recognizable as a metal vocalist, and, you know, that doesn't excuse what he did or anything like that. I will never defend him on that. But I still like As I Lay Dying's music for the musical quality. So, that's that. Joey Belladonna of Anthrax. Anthrax are kind of always my least favorite band in the Big Four, and the vocals aren't necessarily the reason why. I think Joey's a decent singer, but that just I don't listen to Anthrax a ton, so just because they're my least favorite band in the Big Four, so that's that. I don't recognize this guy. Who is he? Russell Allen. I'm not sure who Russell Allen is, actually. Let me look him up. Russell Allen, American singer. What band is he in? Symphony X. Oh, he's a prog metal singer. Okay. I've heard some Symphony X before, but I don't listen to them really casually at all, so I can't really rank his voice. Trevor Sternad, The Black Dahlia Murder. He was definitely one of my favorite modern death metal vocalists. I loved his highs and his lows. I thought he was really great at that. And it's a shame that he's gone now. He's no longer with us. But we will always remember him. So, rest in peace, Trevor. This is C.J. McCreary, I believe. I usually recognize all the tattooed guys. He's a fine enough vocalist. He used to be in Lorna Shore and Signs of the Swarm. But I think there are other vocalists who do his kind of style of like super duper exaggerated, crazy ass vocals better. Like Kyle from Brandon Sacrifice and Alex Terrible. So it's that. I don't recognize this individual right here. This is Nate Johnson. I'm going to look up who Nate Johnson is because I am actually not 100% sure myself. So, Nate Johnson. Nate Johnson, vocalist. The Red Chord, I believe. That's what I'm seeing. He was in the Red Chord. So, I don't listen to the Red Chord, so we're gonna put him in I don't know. All these next vocalists I do know of. This is Chad Gray from Mudvayne. I like his voice. His voice hasn't aged the best because I saw Mudvayne live in 2022 and I thought he sounded fine, but he didn't sound as good as he did on LD50. But I'm sure there's a ton of reasons as for that, so I don't put that against him. But very solid, very recognizable new metal vocalist. I like him a lot. Sam Carter from Architects. I'm also going to put in B tier because I'm not a huge fan of his screaming, but his singing is pretty good. I like his singing a lot, but I feel like his screaming is a little bit too one note for me personally. And yeah, it's just his kind of screaming is just not always my thing. But that's okay. Up next is David Draymond from Disturbed. I'll probably get a lot of flack for even covering him because of some recent events that you can all look up for yourself. But I'm just going to rate this purely because of his voice and how much I like Disturbed's music. I think he's an S-tier vocalist, especially in doom metal. He has a very instantly recognizable voice. You know, he has the ooh-wah! that, everybody loves to meme on and that everybody knows from Down with the Sickness. He's an iconic singer. I like him for his voice and for Disturbed's music. So that's that. Up next is Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson is okay. He's a fine enough vocalist. His voice fits his music very well, but his voice is, on its own just isn't for me. I am curious. I'm going to be seeing him live though with Five Finger Death Punch next month, so I'm very curious to see how he's going to sound. And I think that's that. We've got two more people left, so we've got some. This video has still been obscenely long. I'm sorry for that. This is Mike Patton of Faith No More. I think he's fine. Actually, we'll put him up to B. We'll be a little bit nicer than Mike Patton. His vocal style is very, very unique and can be off-putting for a lot of people, but I think it sounds pretty cool, especially in Faith No More, as I'm not really super familiar with like Mr. Bungle or his other projects. Now, this is CJ McMahon from Thy Art Is Murder. Of course, yet another controversial figure in deathcore, because he's no longer the vocalist of Thy Art Is Murder. But I think his voice on his own is still pretty good. I think he's still among the leagues of the best deathcore vocalists. So, we're going to put him in B. So, of the vocalists that I ranked, here's my list. I'm just going to go down all this list just for people who may have not seen the video the whole way through. If you skip to the end, which I don't blame you, this is a long-ass video. So, once again, God tier vocalists, I'm going with Bruce Dickinson, Chester Bennington, Corey Taylor, James Hetfield, Ozzy Osbourne, Rob Halford, and Ronnie James Dio. S tier, I'm going with Alex Terrible, Corpse Grinder, Courtney LaPlante, Howard Jones, Kyle Anderson, Matt Hafey, Maynard James Keenan, Phil Bozeman, Serge Tonkian, Spencer Charnas, Will Ramos, and David Draymond. A is Ben Dwyer, Brian Garris, Chuck Schuldiner, Joe Duplantier, Johannes Eckerstrom, Jonathan Davis, Matt Tuck, M. Shadows, Noah Sebastian, Phil Anselmo, Ronnie Radke, Tatiana from Ginger, Britton Bond from Wage War, Ivan Moody, Trevor Sternad, CJ McMahon. B is Brittany Slays, Chris Motionless, Danny Filth, Dave Mustaine, Brian and Eric from I Prevail, James Labrie, Maria Brink, Michael Ackerfeld, Ollie Sykes, Sue Metal, Tom Barber, Tim Lambisa, CJ McCreary, Chad Gray, Sam Carter, and Mike Patton. C is Andy Biersack, Darren Malakian, Fred Durst, Mark Hudson, Tom Araya, Zach De La Roca, Danny Worsnop, Jacoby Shaddix, Joe Belladonna, Marilyn Manson, and D is Chris Barnes, all by himself. And the rest of these vocalists I do not know of. Well, I know of them, but I don't know their music well enough. Like Christina Scabia, Eddie Hermida, Mitch Lucker, Vincent Bennett, Austin Carlisle. So, that's my entire metal vocalist tier list. I hope y'all enjoyed listening to this. I want to see who your absolute favorite vocalists are, especially if they're not in this tier list. I want to hear some suggestions. There are some people that I would have put in this list, such as Vessel from Sleep Token, or Andrews Frieden from In Flames, or Tobias Forge from Ghost as well. But I want to see what y'all think. And yeah, that's about it, guys. So have a good day, and I will talk to you in the next video whenever the inspiration hits. So, see ya!